There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a blind page 112 tag video for you. This is in collaboration with Greg of Supposedly Fun. It takes a little bit longer to explain the blind collaboration, so let me very briefly outline what page 112 is all about in general. I created the page 112 tag a couple years ago based on a French literary prize for which the jurors determined a short list based on page 112 only of the novels. No author information, no title, only page 112, and from that assessment of page 112 only, they came up with a short list. I adapted it for use here, and it's, I think, very useful for deciding whether I want to buy a book in the bookstore, for example. The blind collaboration for page 112 is where I and another reader, usually a booktuber, in this case Greg of Supposedly Fun, have exchanged 3 page 112s with each other. So we don't know what book or author is connected to this page of literary output. We have to completely assess it blind, like the jurors in the page 112 prize do. Greg has sent me 3 pages by email. He has also sent me a 4th email, which I have not opened, which I will open at the end of this video to find out what books these pages come from. But I'm going to dive in blind with book number 1. Word on the street was he'd been cheating on his woman with a batty man. She'd caught him in flagrant delicto, and her gangster brother took revenge on him for shaming the family. No wonder I couldn't leave Carmel back then. When me and Morris heard, we met at the Lord Admiral and sat bloating our emotions with pints all night, quietly contemplating the dangerous world we was living in. Still living in. Just last year that fella got beaten to death in Trafalgar Square by some young thugs. One of his attackers was a 17-year-old girl. Soon as I land at the junction of Cazenove and Samford Hill, I am blasted back to the present day by the bad-tempered, four-wheeled kings of the road, furiously honking at the daredevil motorcyclists and suicidal cyclists who weave betwixt and between them like they don't care for their lives. I turn left and then right, taking the scenic, quieter route via Church Street, seeing as I'm in the mood for some contemplative perambulation. So long as my legs can walk, I go walk. I pass Queen Elizabeth's Walk, wherein reside my first 3 rental properties, bought in the 60s before the Great Lovey Invasion. I remember the exact moment where the Kingdom of Barrington was conceived. A summer evening after work, and me and Morris was breezing off, having a lager and a smoke in Clissold Park, delaying the return to our respective farmhouses until the squealing sucklings had been put to bed. We'd both taken off our sweaty shirts, partly because of the heat, partly because we was both a right pair of preening peacocks. Yes, even back then, Morris was a perfect specimen of manhood, with his polished chest and naturally pumped-up pectorals. At times like these, I found it hard to keep my hands off him in public, especially when all around us, males and females of the species, was engaging in extreme canoodling and groping on the grass. Blatantly. Unashamedly. Legally. Okay, wow, I have lots of thoughts and feelings about this. This is obviously a piece of gay fiction, or maybe I'm mistaken, but this page is certainly screaming lavender and talking about gay bashing and homophobic violence. So the story intrigues me a lot. I'm not sure why that sentence, "no wonder I couldn't leave Carmel back then," is italicized, but it is. I don't know what the Kingdom of Barrington is. And Morris, presumably, is also gay. The protagonist, the first-person narrator, is gay, I would safely assume, as is Morris, perhaps, because the narrator hadn't been able to keep his hands off him. I have to say I'm not in love with the writing. There's a weird blend of very casual diction mixed with kind of annoying formal diction. So there's a lot of grammatical evidence that this might be a working class speaker. Maybe I shouldn't make such an assumption, but not a particularly educated person. So in flagrant delicto jumps out as really jarring. If somebody doesn't know how to conjugate the verb be, do they, just because they're gay, do they know that phrase? There's more like that. Betwixt and between, really? No, let me rephrase that. It's not that that it's not believable that the character would know some of these expressions, but it's really jarring to have the mix. Maybe that's the perfect expression of this character, but it's a little jarring for me, I have to say. Contemplative perambulation, that's a really awful phrase, I think. And a perfect specimen of manhood is a common phrase, but it's too common. So yeah, I'm not in love with the writing, but the story is intriguing. That's my reaction to book number 1. Let's go to book number 2. Chalk dust floated forever in shafts of sunlight. She enjoyed cutting out sugar paper, turning it in her hands to make complex shapes. If a child was very good, she snipped out a special zigzag-edged star, then wrote their name on it and tacked it high on the wall. After her probationary month, she was presented with her own pinking scissors with a neat typed label on the handle. Mrs. Brandt, teaching assistant. Today she cut out whole skies of stars. She remembered herself as a little girl, rushing home waving a glowing report card. Her parents used to be so proud. Raina had always been good. An only child, everything she did somehow meant more. Every success a triumph, every failure a tragedy. She wished for brothers and sisters, if only to share the attention. You must always set an example, said her mother and father, both teachers in and out of the classroom. Then it happened, on her way home from the last day of school. She was freshly 16. She never told them, never told anyone. She still got her matric, but told her parents she didn't want to be a teacher anymore. While they were still open-mouthed, she got engaged to the most serious of the young vergers from their church, the one who always looked genuinely pleased to hand out hymn books. Peter was equally surprised by Raina's hasty interest, but she knew she didn't have much time. Always slender, she'd be showing in weeks, not months. Okay, well, Greg has really chosen well to really get a flavor for not only the writing, but the story. I mean, this reads just like almost like a prose poem. It could be a micro short story in and of itself. I liked it a lot. So was she raped? On her way home the last day of school. That doesn't sound like some consensual hookup. That sounds like a sexual assault. Yeah, I don't have much to say. I just think the writing is gorgeous. It's not overly prettified, but it flows trippingly off the tongue. Whole skies of stars. That's just a gorgeous phrase, and there's several like that. It's so good that I don't have anything more to say about it. It's really good. All right, let's go to book number 3. And yet it's the rest I want to know about, I said, catching myself, almost echoing Miranda's father. At this point, Miranda recognized that the conversation was veering to the personal, and excused herself to look for the bathroom. The rest, Dad, he went on, is a closed book these days. But the first time I came here, I was 17, and I was with people who read a lot, loved poetry, were deeply involved in cinema, and knew all there is to know about classical music. They inducted me into their clan, and every vacation I had from school and later from university, I'd come to Rome to stay with them and just learn. I said nothing, but he caught the look in my eye. But more than my friendship with them, you above everyone else made me who I am today. We never had secrets, you and I. You know about me, and I know about you. In this, I consider myself the luckiest son on earth. You taught me how to love books, music, beautiful ideas, people, pleasure, even myself. Better yet, you taught me that we have one life only, and that time is always stacked against us. This much I know, young as I am. It's just that I forget the lesson sometimes. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I can see you now, not as my father, but as a man in love. I've never seen you like this. It makes me very happy, almost envious to see you. You are so young suddenly. It must be love. If it hadn't occurred to me until then, I knew now that I was indeed the luckiest father alive. People were milling around us, some trying to wedge their way to the counter. None of them seemed to intrude on our intimate moment together. We were having a quiet fireside chat in one of Rome's most bustling cafes. Okay, well, the writing's fine, and this may have been just an unfortunate page 112, but this sounds way too sentimental to capture my interest at all. The writing's fine, but I'm not interested in father and son having an intimate chat about how much they love each other. It just doesn't excite me at all. Within the context of a larger story, it could be quite moving if I cared about the characters and the previous part of the work of fiction built to this moment. It could be extremely moving, but in isolation, it kind of makes me... it's too sickly sweet for my tastes. So, I think everybody can guess book number 2 is my first pick, hands down. And I would say book number 1 is my second pick, but there's a noticeable gap in my interest between my first pick, book number 2, and my second pick, book number 1, which was the gay story. And then another probably even wider gap between book number 1, my second pick, and my third pick, which is book number 3. So those are my picks. Now I'm so curious to find out what these are, because obviously Greg and I took care to choose books, checking each other's Goodreads that we had not read, so I have no idea. I don't recognize these, and I'm about to find out. Da-da-da-da! Oh, wow, okay. Well, I was kind of expecting... Oh, they're all gay. Greg, you're lovely. Sent me a whole bunch of gay stuff. Okay, this is fascinating. So, I'll give you by book number, and then I'll give it to you again in my order of preference. So the first book that I read from, book number 1, is Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. This is a book that I saw Greg talk about today on a video that he posted. It wasn't a book haul, it was, I forget what it was, but I just watched it today, and I thought, oh, I bet he's going to send me excerpt from that, but I didn't recognize it. Book number 2 is You Will Be Safe Here by Damien Barr, and that was my first pick. That's also a very gay novel, but I think there's 2 stories, so what I got was probably not from the gay part of the story. And book number 3 is Find Me by Andrei Aciman, which is the sequel to the other book. And he's written a note. Book 3 is a bit of trolling on my part, since you didn't like Call Me By Your Name. But that just makes me curious to see how you would respond to a passage from the sequel. Well, Greg, you got your answer. So, just to keep everything straight, my first pick was book number 2, You Will Be Safe Here by Damien Barr. My second pick, but like I say, quite a bit lower than my first pick, was book number 1, Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo. And my final pick, quite a ways, even a wider gap, was book number 3, Find Me by Andrei Aciman. Okay, so let's go through them in order of my preference. What I'd heard about the Damien Barr novel didn't really interest me because it was too kind of a bifurcated narrative. One was set in a South African concentration camp, and the other was ex-gay concentration camp or treatment center. Same thing. And it just didn't grab me, and part of the reason it didn't grab me was I find with novels that have 2 storylines is that I always end up liking one and not enjoying the other. So I didn't warm to it when I heard Eric rave about it, but I really liked the writing, so I will certainly give it a try now because of that. It's Damien Barr's it's his debut novel, I'm pretty sure, and it's been getting all kinds of accolades. And Damien Barr, he's very active on Twitter. I believe he's Scottish, but the reason I say that is he has just started a TV show about Scottish books on Scottish television. It's been all over Twitter. My second pick quite a ways down from my first pick, book number 1, Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. She is the co-winner of this year's Booker for Girl, Women, Other. It is about two men in their 70s living in modern Britain. They were boyhood friends from Antigua, and they have been lovers for 50 years secretly. Both, I think at least one, probably both married for all that time, or much of that time, but they have kept up a gay love relationship throughout half a century. So that just sounds absolutely fascinating. And I have this book on ebook. And I did a page 112 test just for myself. So it was a very different text, and I didn't like the writing. So I also didn't like the writing here. But I need to think about it. I reacted against the high and low diction, kind of bumping up against each other in that page. But I might have a different reaction knowing that it's in a kind of post-colonial idiom where things do all get mashed up in interesting ways. So with fresh eyes, I will go back to it. I have it on ebook. I know Greg's champing at the bit to give it a try. I might try to rope him into a buddy read, but I didn't. The story sounded really intriguing, wasn't taken with the writing. And then way down, yeah, I hate Andrew Asselman's writing. I just hate it. I hated that page so much, and now that I know it's him, I bailed on Call Me By Your Name. I just thought it was so awful. It was so Proustian, and the yearnings and the romantic pretentiousness. Oh, God! You couldn't pay me to see the movie either. So, I am reconfirmed in my deep lack of interest in Mr. Asselman. So, that was fabulous, Greg. Thank you very much. I am dying to see what Greg made of my 3 page 112s. Scoot over to his channel and check that out. And everybody, thanks for watching.